Hi, everybody. I Hi. I was not even like remotely prepared on like an emotional level to read. Um Decoration wise, I feel like it's not Christmassy enough in here to be reading a Christmas book. You know what I mean? But that's okay. Here she is. So I can't like sit behind a um uh the browser screen. I have to like actually sit here and read, which is so funny and awful cuz you won't even see the book. I could put it up here, but that's stupid as fuck. Um but no matter. So I've only seen the movie. I haven't read the book yet. Um that's so funny. Um I think it's published by like the Hallmark people. So it makes sense that they turned it into a movie. Um I they should not have turned it into the movie. Cuz like what are we doing? But anyway, are we ready? Should I jump right in? Be honest. Ooh, maybe I don't open anything. Fuck it, close Discord too. Weeball. Maybe it'll help. You ready? Okay, perfect. Oh, as soon as the stream kills itself, which could happen very quickly, she is not super pleased. Um, I'm calling it quits. Let me put that in the title. If I die, stream over. Let me see. LMAO. Okay. It's actually either I have two Beanie birthdays going on right now, but I'm ignoring both of them because I'm evil and fucked up. Okay. Chapter 1. Megan Turner paused to tuck a wayward strand of her curly hair into her bun, covered by her small cap, before grabbing her brass candlestick from a diminutive. Hope it's not too quick. I don't know. Thank you. I appreciate that because I have to put my Christmas lights up at least. This is pretty awesome. Yeah. I love to read. Let's go. But also happy five streams. It does look like it ended after I had kind of called it quits, because five is how many I've streamed. So anyway, before grabbing her brass candlestick from a diminutive hand carved table, she hurried toward the foyer, cupping her hand around the candle's flame. It was important to keep it from the guttering out as she moved from keep it from guttering out as she moved to greet the next wave of visitors to the Whitley Morin mansion. The mansion itself was a 30-room spectacular, located just a few miles from the little upstate New York town of Cutter Springs, nestled in the area. Oh God, what the fuck? Adirondack Mountains. Tourists flocked to the town both for its nearness to the mansion as well as its idyllic country setting. Though Megan had gotten her undergraduate degree from Columbia, this will be fun. From Columbia, she quickly turned home to Cutter Springs and its nearby university for her graduate degree in American history. There was no better there was no place better than home. As she strode toward the mansion's long main corridor, she passed intricately carved door frames, recessed wall panels, and custom made furnishings. She inhaled deeply, catching the rich, evocative scent from the pine garlands that adorned the walls and doors. A bubble of excitement rose within her. Christmas was just around the corner, and she couldn't wait. She'd been working as a tour guide at the Whitley Morin Mansion for 2 years, and there was something so special about the house during the holiday season. The enormous rooms didn't seem quite so cavernous when each one had a Christmas tree. Each chamber had its own fireplace, a true luxury back when the mansion had been finished in 1902, and swags of evergreen and twinkling glass ornaments decorated each mantel, making every room inviting and cheerful. It was that special atmosphere that brought visitors by the hundreds to the house during the week leading up to Christmas, including the dozen people now waiting for her in the foyer. She approached them, noting with happiness that there were men and women, young and old, and people of every color, all here to admire the Christmas cheer in the home of the great Charles Whitley. Good afternoon and Merry Christmas, she said brightly as she neared the visitors. She bobbed into a curtsy. My name is Rosie. I'm the housekeeper. It's my responsibility to keep this 10-bedroom house clean and orderly for Mr. Whitley. It's also my job to keep Mr. Whitley on schedule. He's a very busy man, you know, and somebody has to make sure he remembers to eat. She gave the guests a wink, and they chuckled. Now, she said, looking at the children in the group, does anyone here know who Charles Whitley is? A long pause followed. Kids furrowed their brows in thought. One boy of about 12 reached for his pocket and Megan held up a finger. Now, I keep seeing our guests with these little devices in their hands, and I don't know what they are, but you can't go looking for answers there. Naturally, Megan knew exactly what a mobile phone was, but to the character of Rosie, who knew only the technology of the early 20th century, such things were strange and baffling. Chekhov's smartphone. So excited. Thank you. The boy grinned sheepishly as he lowered his hand. Finally, a girl of about 9 with light brown skin and a mane of fluffy curls raised her hand. When Megan nodded at her, the girl said, Charles Wilbur Whitley was born in 1870. He was orphaned. Man, fucking little know-it-all. What are we doing? Anyway, he was orphaned when he was 14 and he started working in a steel mill soon after. By the time he was only 21, he'd become rich. Exactly, Megan said, with an approving smile. Mr. Whitley amassed. What the hell is that? There's like a tiny little swirl above the word Anne. And it's like printed into the book because I haven't opened this. So, I don't. This is the first. I just cracked this open today. So I don't know what that is. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. Sorry. Exactly, Megan said with an approving smile. Mr. I don't know. I don't think it's like. It could be like a pen thing. But again, I just opened this. So it wasn't me. Whatever. Exactly, Megan said with an approving smile. Mr. Whitley amassed a fortune through patenting improvements to the steel milling process, making him the late 19th century equivalent of our young tech billionaires. He became one of the country's most wealthy and influential men through his steel empire and technological brilliance. She gestured to the vaulted ceiling in the foyer. He built this house in 1902 as a gift to his fiancée Eliza. Mr. Whitley spared no expense when building his country estate, including hiring architects from France, as well as using Indiana limestone on the exterior, Italian marble on the interior, and Russian mahogany all throughout the house. The home itself has 30 rooms, including the 10 bedrooms I mentioned earlier. Who needs that many rooms? An older man exclaimed. Well, Megan said, as a very important man, Mr. Whitley needs to demonstrate to his visitors that his home is equally important. So, in addition to the bedrooms, there are 12 bathrooms, a ballroom, 3 drawing rooms, a parlor, conservatory, billiards room, and Mr. Whitley's private office, as well as outdoor amenities, including the tennis courts and a swimming pool, which has been drained for the winter. The property itself is 10 acres, half of which is covered by a forest of red spruce and eastern white pine, and it has its own lake and a boating pavilion. The older man whistled. Pretty nice digs. They are, at that, Megan said with a nod. Mr. Whitley wanted to give his fiancée something special and feel what he has. And we feel that he has. You'll meet both Mr. Whitley and Eliza Morin later. Now, follow me. She turned and walked in a measured pace down the corridor and gestured to the paintings. Mr. Whitley employs a gentleman full-time to constantly circulate between the auction houses of London, Paris, Rome, and Berlin in order to purchase items for his home, including these paintings by the old masters. Her favorite picture, by far, was one of a woman reading in a window seat, illuminated by a shaft of sunlight. It was pretty much Megan's idea of paradise. You'll also note the display cases filled with objects purchased during Mr. Whitley's own trips to Europe. The visitors made sounds of appreciation as they passed cabinets filled with china and crystal and gilded metal. Filled with china, crystal, and gilded metal, sorry. Looks like a lot of dusting, a woman in a Christmas sweater said. This house employs 10 housemaids who work under me, and our days are filled with a never ending mountain of cleaning every room, all the laundry, and the bathrooms. It doesn't stop, she chuckled ruefully. We also have Mr. Fredericks, the butler, as well as 5 footmen, a cook, 3 scullery maids, 3 kitchen maids, 15 gardeners, and a chauffeur slash mechanic for Mr. Whitley's automobile. It's like a private army, the woman said in awe. It is, and it takes a considerable amount of work between myself and Mr. Fredericks to keep everyone in line. Megan stepped inside an elegantly furnished parlor, its windows facing one of the snow-covered lawns. The room was trimmed in more vintage Christmas decor. Are we all here? She asked, counting the number of visitors. When she was sure that everyone in the tour group was present, she picked up a small enameled picture frame that sat atop a side table. This is a photograph, excuse me, of Mr. Whitley, she said. The visitors pressed closer, all of them eager to get a glimpse of the mansion's owner. I wouldn't mind him in my Christmas stocking, one gray haired woman said. So true, Grandma. Say that shit. Megan glanced down at the picture. She had looked at it hundreds of times, but still felt a little jump of excitement in her chest every time she did. At the time, the photograph I love reading. Anyway, at the time the photograph was taken, Charles Whitley had been in his prime. He was 31, tall, with broad shoulders, nicely filling out his custom tailored suit jacket. Like many other men of his day, Charles Whitley sported a short, neatly trimmed beard. Standing behind his desk, he gazed at the camera with a single minded intensity, as if trying to figure out not only how the camera worked, but how he could improve the process of taking photographs. It was a striking image, and one she never tired of seeing. This was taken just before Mr. Whitley left for a trip to Paris in 1902. He looks kind of impatient, a woman with purple hair said. The liberals are fucking back at it again. So, standing still has never been something at which Mr. Whitley excels. You're all my friends, so I can confess something to you. Megan lowered her voice to an audible whisper. I have a little crush on Mr. Whitley, but never tell him. That has to stay between you and me. Love you. Love you, lobs. So true. I love the lobs. Lobsters. Where the fuck was I? The guests chuckled. Even though Megan was telling the truth, she did have a crush on Charles Whitley. Most modern women nursed crushes on movie stars and rock musicians, but she was just a little in love with a man who had lived well over 100 years ago. No wonder her life seemed stuck. Lobsters. So true. Your secret's safe with us, a woman said, smiling. Oh, thank you. Megan pressed a hand to her heart. It was silly to pine for someone who had lived in another era, rather than focusing on finding someone special now. Well, she'd tried, but she hadn't been very successful at it, which was why, a month after she and Brandon had broken up, she hadn't gone out on a single date with anyone. When did Mr. Whitley die? The older man asked. Megan didn't have to feign her sadness. He disappeared mysteriously in 1902, right after he returned from Paris. His disappearance was just a week before Christmas, as a matter of fact. No one has ever solved the puzzle of where he went or why. The visitors murmured with curiosity among themselves. Now, Megan said, please follow me into Mr. Whitley's private study. She took the guests through a large, heavy wooden door into another room. It was lined with shelves that were crammed full of books, and the furniture was substantial and masculine. Ah, classic manly furniture. What the fuck does that mean? But whatever. Brown? Anyway. Masculine. I. No, okay, there it is. Masculine was cut in half, so I got lost. The fireplace was lit, and two chairs flanked the stone, as if anticipating Charles Whitley to come in and sit down to read the newspaper. Windows lined one wall, with the thick green velvet drapes pulled back to let in bright light from the snowy afternoon. Directly in front of the windows was the same desk that was in the photograph of Charles Whitley. This is my favorite room in the house. Megan stood beside the desk. Mr. Whitley's study is the room where he spends most of his time. This desk is from the first international exposition of modern decorative arts held in Turin, Italy in May of 1902. It's carved in the Art Nouveau style, which is extremely modern and topped with red leather from Morocco. Sure beats working at my kitchen table, the purple-haired woman said. I hate people who talk. If this were me, if I were in this fucking tour group, I would start eating people. Um, unless you were asking a question. Commentary, I could fucking do without. Thank you so much. Keep it to your in the book, sure. But if I'm going on a fucking tour, shh. Ask a question or shut the fuck up. Not everyone's the class clown, okay? Well, this isn't high school. Shut the fuck up. Anyway, Megan smiled. Mr. Whitley's work is Hi Cat, story time. It's a timeless Christmas. The font is really great. I know not many people care about that kind of thing. Very readable, very pretty. Deeply enjoying it. Hope you're doing well, Cat. Um, okay, no. Mr. Whitley's work is extremely important to him, so he wanted to be sure that his desk reflected that. As you can see, he's in the middle of several projects. She waved at the papers stacked neatly atop the desk. Lucite boxes covered the papers, ensuring that they couldn't be touched or decay from the atmosphere. Only under the supervision of one of the house's trustees could someone go through the papers covered with Charles Whitley's bold handwriting. This room is nearly identical to how Mr. Whitley left it right before his disappearance, she said. Some papers were moved shortly after he disappeared, but we tried to keep the room as he would have left it. Kind of a neat freak, huh? The boy with the mobile phone said. Mr. Whitley didn't become a self-made man by being sloppy, Megan answered. So be sure to make your bed when your mom tells you to. Everyone laughed, and Megan felt that familiar sense of peace and happiness that always came over her when leading tours. There was nothing better than making the past accessible to the present. Hello! Yes, we are reading a book. We are reading A Timeless Christmas, which was turned into a Hallmark movie, so it's very bad. Doing alright, switched shifts with coworkers, so I'm doing the late shift tonight. Ew! I'm sorry to hear that. But anyway, welcome in. Hope you're doing well. Okay, okay. Being a tour guide didn't quite fulfill her need to share history with others, since it was limited to the visitors that came to the house. If she could shape a generation's mind and bring history alive for people evolving from teenagers to adults, then she'd feel like she was fulfilling her true purpose. Being a history professor at the university would be a dream come true. Making that happen, though, was proving to be much more difficult than she'd expected. But she was here now, teaching the visitors about history, and that nearly satisfied her need to educate others. She continued, "It was a condition in Mr. Whitley's will that whomever inherited the house upon his demise was to preserve at least 50% of the home in its original condition. No changes could be made, so that future generations could learn from him, which is precisely what was done." She pointed to a beautiful golden enamel clock sitting on the desk. It boasted a large dial adorned with flowers and a marble base capped with gilt fittings. The visitors murmured with appreciation. Mr. Whitley brought this clock back from a trip to France shortly before his disappearance. We don't know much about it since it was purchased secondhand in 1902. Our guess is that it's an 18th century mantel clock, perhaps from one of the expert clockmakers in Switzerland. It's not too bad. It was only really 4 hours of work because everyone's asleep by now. What do you do? I forget. I think you've mentioned it, but I've forgotten, unfortunately. But happy only 4 hours of work. That's great. Happy for you. Are you home now or still at it? Where was I? Okay. All the other clocks in the house are working, the little girl with thick curls said, but this one doesn't. Megan shook her head. No matter what our engineers and experts do, they can't seem to make the clock work. We've studied Mr. Whitley's journals for an answer, but to no avail. All of Mr. Whitley's journals are housed in our archives here in the mansion. Go ahead and have a look around the study, but be sure not to touch. We have many rare books in here, including first editions of Charles Dickens' Bleak House and Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. The guests drifted around the room, commenting on the many books it housed. It was a book lover's dream room, and so Megan adored it. Her own personal library, which was admittedly expensive, consisted mostly of battered history books found in used bookshops, as well as well-worn paperback romances. That's us, bitch. Thank you so much for the follow. You are so sexy, cool, and kind. Okay. The visitors also looked over the desk that had been so perfectly preserved. It was indeed a monument to industry. It had been wildly expensive back in its own day. Today, the desk was priceless. The little girl took particular interest in the papers, bending close to study them, which made Megan smile. After a few moments, Megan said, "I'll show you the rest of the house, including Mr. Whitley's conservatory, his bedroom, and Eliza Morin's bedroom." She inherited the house after Mr. Whitley's disappearance and eventually married and raised a family here. Not only will you meet Eliza Morin and Mr. Fredericks, the butler, you will also meet Mr. Whitley himself. The crowd made quiet sounds of anticipation. On our way, be sure to take a good look at the Christmas decorations. We're using genuine turn of the century decor, including glass ornaments from oh god, Lashua, Germany, could be anything, and pine boughs taken from this property's forest. As the visitors filed out of the study, she said, "And don't forget, in 6 days it will be Christmas Eve, and the mansion will host a big holiday party for everyone." Back in his time, Mr. Whitley used to throw a Christmas party for his employees at the old Belham Hotel. The steel mill still holds its party at the hotel, but we will have our own festive gathering for visitors and the local community here at the mansion. Okay. Like home care aid, made sure everyone's has their dinner in a minute. Oh, okay. Still work 4 more hours. Good luck out there. Hope the next 4 hours are normal and good. Um, should be 7:24. She's in the same time zone as me, to my knowledge. Um, so it should be 2 hours from you, if I recall correctly. So it should be 5:25 for you in Alberta. Okay, where the fuck was I? Sounds wonderful, a woman said. It is. Be sure to bring your friends and family. Everyone who worked at the Whitley Morin Mansion loved hosting the party, and it attracted people from nearby areas. Some visitors even came from New York City and Montreal to be a part of the holiday fun. Please go ahead to the next room on your left. More visitors left the study, and Megan placed a hand on the little girl's shoulder. The girl paused. Megan waited until everyone had gone before bending down to the girl. "Thanks for being my shield, Sophia," she whispered. The girl beamed. "Sure, it's not just because my dad works here. Charles Whitley is my hero. Someday I'm going to be an inventor and an entrepreneur just like him. I'm looking forward to seeing what you invent. Now catch up with the other guests so nobody suspects we're in cahoots." Oh, I just had a friend who lived in Alberta, so um I'm I can do that's mountain time, I think. And then Pacific time is the one over, so that's 3 hours. And then there's some gay bullshit in between Eastern and and Mountain. Um, those are the only time zones I know. I only know the American ones. Other than that, ooh, I don't know my time zones. Okay. Okay, so okay. Sophia nodded and hurried on. The rest of the tour went smoothly, with visitors asking. Okay, so she's not a know-it-all. She just works here, in a way, if you think about it. The little girl. The rest of the tour went smoothly, with visitors asking questions and admiring just the house itself. But the festive decorations, not just the house itself, but its festive decorations. In the preserved kitchen, they met Mr. Fredericks, played by Don Romano, who showed them the china collection and wine cellar, and talked about what was required to house and feed a staff the size of the mansions. Oh, I'm a geography fan. I love maps and stuff. It's one of my favorites. Time zones are time zones are rough though. Upstairs by the bedrooms, the guests were introduced to Charles Whitley's fiancée, Eliza, who was played by Amber Parisis. Sure. She discussed what it was like to be a hostess for some of the biggest society events in her day, and she gave them a brief tour of her impressive closet that was the size of most people's living rooms. The highlight of the tour came when the guests went into the ballroom and met Charles Whitley himself, who was enacted with some self-importance by Ryan McConnell. While Megan liked Dan and Amber, she wasn't so crazy about Ryan. He never hung out in the break room or joined after-hours gatherings, insisting that the real Charles Whitley would have never gotten friendly with the staff. It rubbed Megan the wrong way, so she tried not to be around Ryan very much. The guests were encouraged to ask Mr. Whitley questions, and while Ryan certainly didn't have the technical knowledge or imagination of Charles Whitley himself, he studied enough about the man to be able to reasonably field inquiries about how he'd amassed such a substantial fortune within just a few years, and what innovations he was most proud of. What kind of story is this? It's a romance. It's a um this was adapted into a Hallmark movie. So it's a Christmas Hallmark movie but in book form, which so good. The movie is actually pretty okay. Like it's not acted super terribly. Like the two actors that they chose had decent chemistry. Normally, Hallmark movies are abysmally bad in that area, but this movie was pretty good. Um Oh, we could watch it together, like on Discord or something. I'll have to think about it. Um. Anyway, da-da-da-da-da. Inevitably, someone asked about Whitley's disappearance, and Ryan always said that he'd gone on an adventure, which was a nice way to say that nobody knew what had happened to Charles Whitley. Movie night, yes, exactly. Christmas movie night. It'll be so exciting, and it's been a while since I've seen the movie, so everything will be a surprise for me as well. It was a little spooky to consider him vanishing, and they played this aspect up during tours around Halloween, but for Christmas they focused on the big party and keeping everything festive. You can still do ghost stuff during Christmas, I think. After the guests, excuse me, sorry I got excited about the ghosts, met Mr. Whitley, Megan escorted them to the front door. Don't forget about our holiday party on Christmas Eve. She waved goodbye to the departing visitors. Smiling to herself, she closed the door and leaned against it. A warm, pleasant glow settled through her. She had never finished a tour without feeling satisfied. She and the rest of the cast had encouraged a love of history in the visitors, which was exactly the point of turning the mansion into a museum. She checked the watch she kept pinned on the inside of her sleeve. There was still an evening tour in a couple of hours, which meant she had a bit of time to get off her feet and read a few pages of her latest book, a historical romance set in the Victorian era where the heroine was an artist and the hero was a gentleman returning from war. Her smile faded when she remembered what Brandon used to say about her love of history and historical romance. You're stuck in the past. I want someone who's with me now. Megan shook her head as she walked toward the staff break room. She wouldn't be gloomy, not when Christmas was so close. The break room had once been the servants' dining hall, back when the mansion had a staff. It had been modernized with a kitchenette and a nice set of cubbies for the employees' possessions. Instead of one long table, smaller round tables were dotted around the room, and potted poinsettias were placed on each table to add to the house's holiday atmosphere. High windows let in dazzling December afternoon light. Nice work today, Dan. Megan poured herself a cup of coffee in her favorite reindeer mug and sat down next to Dan and his daughter, the girl with the curls. And thanks again for the help, Sophia. Sophia looked up from drawing yet another idea for an invention. You bet. I expect full payment with a hot cocoa at Tina's Diner. Megan chuckled and looked at Dan, who was still wearing his butler's uniform. He raised his hands. I can't help it if my daughter has good negotiating skills. That's what comes from idolizing a business genius, Megan said. Got to be ruthless to get ahead. Speaking of getting ahead, Dan said, have you gotten that letter of recommendation from Professor Coyle yet? Megan fought a grimace. Not so far. She hasn't responded to any of my emails. Dan fixed her with a parental look. You've got to be more assertive if you want that letter, Megan. I know how much you want that teaching position at the university, and academics jobs don't just fall into your lap, even if you do have a PhD in history. I know, you're right, she sighed. I just worry that I'm being pushy. Besides, she added, I'm really busy leading Christmas tours and getting ready for the Christmas party here. Dan didn't look convinced. But before he could speak, Sophia said, Daddy, stop being so much of a dad. Both Megan and Dan laughed. Okay, you got me, he said. I'll make it up to you. Join Sophia and Lydia and me for dinner. You can even bring Brandon. Megan's smile faded. Brandon is in the past tense. A slightly awkward silence fell. Good, Sophia declared. Sophia Grace, Dan said in admonishment. His daughter jutted out her chin. He was mean and thought history was boring. Well, Megan sadly, he thought I was a boring girlfriend too. Stop being a dad girl. Dan doesn't know how. He's the daddiest, if I may. Oh, anyway, whatever. Oh, no, 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 no. I don't like him, the little girl said. Me neither, her father added. Megan rose and she tapped a finger on Sophia's nose. Thanks, guys. I'll be okay. It's been almost a month, and while I don't miss him, the breakup still hurts. As she went to sink, okay, if you don't miss him, why does it hurt? Just curious. Okay, anyway, as she went to the sink to rinse out her cup, she joked. That's what happens when you compare every guy you meet to Charles Whitley. Nobody stacks up. Try being almost married to him. Wearing her Eliza costume, Amber came into the staff room and walked to the small fridge. Visitors can't get over the fact that Eliza married Whitley's business rival. They look at me like I'm some kind of monster. It certainly is a detail that catches their imaginations, Megan said. You have to wonder what Eliza was thinking. I do wonder. Amber grabbed a container of salad from the refrigerator and popped it open. But then I like the process of getting into character and finding out someone's hidden motivations, she shrugged. It's the actor in me. There are still performances of the holiday one acts, right? Dan asked. We wanted to take Sophia. We're performing every night this week except Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Amber took a bite of her salad. Oh my god. I'll definitely check it out, Megan said. I bet you steal the show. Before Amber could answer, Ryan, dressed in his Charles Whitley costume, stormed into the break room. Hot on his heels was Philip Tran, the museum's manager. Be reasonable, Ryan, Philip pleaded. I will not! Ryan struck a pose, his arms crossed over his chest. It's time for you to give me the recognition I deserve. Amber, Megan, and Dan exchanged worried looks. This wasn't good. The Christmas party's just 6 days away, Philip said. Everybody looks forward to the speech given by Charles Whitley. Which means that I am the star of the museum, Ryan lifted his chin. And if that's true, my salary should reflect that. Okay. Advocate for yourself, Ryan. I hear you, buddy. Uh, I've asked for a raise before and you hedged. Now I'm demanding what I'm worth. Philip's brow furrowed. There's just not enough money in the budget to give you the raise you want. Megan watched this exchange with concern. She and her fellow reenactors were given a decent but not excessive salary, with the rest of the money from ticket sales, grants, and donations going to the upkeep of the mansion and other expenses. Come on, Ryan, she said. We're all working here because we love history, not because we want a plush lifestyle. I don't know about you, Ryan said and sniffed, but I have ambition, and if this establishment can't give me the money I deserve, he glared around the room, then I quit. A shocked silence fell. Megan stared at Ryan, hardly believing what he'd just said. We have an evening tour coming through in an hour, Philip said in a stunned voice. And the Christmas party in 6 days, Megan added. You should have thought of that before refusing to meet my demands. Ryan untied his cravat, pulled off his turn of the century jacket, and shucked his embroidered waistcoat before throwing all of them onto the floor. Merry Christmas! Can't believe this isn't a fanfiction. Dude, that's my favorite part about books like these, is they read like fanfiction, but they're real. This is a book someone published. So basically, if anybody thinks that they can't do anything, such as publish their own book, shut the fuck up. Yes, you can. It's very easy, apparently. Um I'm being unkind. It's not bad. It's just not good either. Like anyway. Uh before throwing them all onto the floor. Merry Christmas! With that, he marched from the room. Megan's heart sank. Without Charles Whitley, there was no tour, no party, no anything. He was the museum's biggest draw, as evidenced by their visitors' posts on the museum's social media accounts. Okay. No way, dude. Maybe the museum could try to get by without someone playing Charles Whitley, saying that he disappeared, but their attendance numbers would drop precipitously. Okay, they cracked open thesaurus.com. Anyway, suddenly Dan jumped up and grabbed the clothing from the floor. I'll do it. I'll play Whitley. Sophia gasped with excitement. Yes, Daddy! You've wanted to be Mr. Whitley for forever! That was the first Megan had ever heard of Dan's ambition, and his cheeks reddened a little at being called out by his daughter, but he looked at Philip. Well, you don't have a beard, Philip said. I can get one from the university's theater department. He'll make a great Charles Whitley, Megan said encouragingly. Give him a try, Amber added. After a moment's deliberation, Philip nodded. Okay, go get a beard and be back here in 45 minutes. He hurried from the room. High five, Charles Whitley! Ooh. 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 Megan lifted her hand, and a grinning Dan slapped his palm against hers. Go suit up. Ready to go? Dan asked his daughter. Wait until Mommy hears about this. Let's get you in costume, Daddy. Taking Sophia's hand in his, Dan quickly left. Crisis averted, Amber said and exhaled in relief. I love this job, and I need it too. It's not as though community theater pays extravagantly. Now we all get to keep our jobs, Megan said. As Amber finished her salad, standing over the sink, Megan sank down onto a chair. She was glad for Dan and felt the same relief that Amber felt. They'd come much too close to missing out on the holiday, even if Megan couldn't have everything she wanted, like that teaching job or someone special in her life who accepted her as she was. There was always Christmas. Chapter 2. Meanwhile, in 1902, no fucking way! No way! Meanwhile, in 1902, be sure to put my trunks in my room, Charles Whitley said to the two footmen as they stood in the foyer, and take these crates into my study. Carefully. They're my purchases from Paris, including something I intend to give Eliza. He pointed to the large wooden boxes marked fragile. Yes, Mr. Whitley, one of the footmen said, and bring a crowbar. Yes, sir. It felt good to be back home again after so long an absence. Charles had been living in hotel rooms for the past few weeks, and while the rooms had been luxurious, there was something so right about sleeping in his own bed, beneath the roof of his house he designed and built. Yes, I'm so excited about time travel. Let's fucking go. Besides, his home was certainly the elegant equal of any of the stylish, sumptuous. I know, so true. Meanwhile, in 1902. Like, what a silly thing to say. But anyway, no, no, no. Sumptuous hotels of Europe. He'd worked very hard to ensure that everyone who entered his home knew that he was worthy of their respect. From almost nothing, he'd built a massive steel empire to the cost of nearly everything else in his life. Work always came first. Is that a Christmas gift? Rosie asked as she came into the foyer. As usual, the housekeeper wore her apron perfectly starched and her cap neatly in place. Sumptuous like overgrown. Okay. Thank you, Kat. Personal dictionary. Da, 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 da. Charles wouldn't rely on her if she'd been in any way slovenly. He needed her to keep his own tumultuous life in order. Shout out high school vocab. So true. Thank you, high school vocab. He shot Rosie a questioning glance. Because Christmas is in less than a week, Rosie exclaimed. I explained. I assume you'd intended to give your fiancée a gift for the holiday. If it will make her happy to say it's a Christmas gift, then we will call it that. His housekeeper rolled her eyes. It was a measure of how much Charles relied on her that he was willing to endure her impertinence. My goodness, she said, for someone who throws his employees such a lavish Christmas party each year, you truly have the least appreciation for the holiday. After pulling a journal from his valise, Charles strode from the foyer and headed toward his office, knowing that Rosie would follow him. He walked beneath the coved ceilings and past the cabinets he'd paid to have stocked with beautiful objects from around the world, though he'd never stopped to look at his purchases. Always he was too busy to meander and take his time. Slowing down was for those who didn't have a destination. As he anticipated, Rosie was fast on his heels as he walked. The date on the calendar is entirely arbitrary, he said over his shoulder, and should have nothing to do with how we lead our lives. However, my employees enjoy the holiday, and I'm not an unfeeling monster. He stepped into his study, barely seeing the custom-bound books and rare volumes. Instead, he went quickly to his desk, where he set down his journal. Tidy stacks of paper awaited him, and he was gratified to see that they'd been undisturbed during his month-long working visit to France. Rosie ensured that the rest of his staff did not touch any of his papers or documents, not even to clean. Consequently, a thin layer of dust had settled over everything on his desk. Glad to hear it, Rosie said tartly, standing in front of his desk, even if you don't actually go to the party. Why should I? The hotel provides plenty of food and drinks and other festive things. My employees don't need me glowering at everyone to make the night complete. Two burly footmen brought one of the crates into his study, with a crowbar balanced atop the wood. When they set it down on the imported Persian rug, Charles grabbed the crowbar. The tool felt good in his hands. He had grown rich using not just his mind, but his hands, and it never hurt to get back to the skills that had first propelled him from poverty into wealth. One never knew when fortune would reverse itself, and he'd find himself with nothing again. Using the crowbar, Charles. Ah, a worldly rich man. That's good. Very believable. Using the crowbar, Charles pried the lid off the crate. It made a satisfying crack. He set both the tool and the lid aside and carefully extracted the crate's contents. "Oh, that's lovely," Rosie said. It was a gold-plated mantel clock with an intricate enamel design on its case and pieces of white marble for its base. Charles couldn't guess at its age. Despite his research into the topic, though it seemed to last it seemed at least 100 years old. There's no maker's mark either. He did know that he had to bring it back from Paris to give to Eliza. She'd been rather glum over his trip abroad, despite his explanation that he needed to travel to visit French steel mills. "You're either at your desk or at your mills," she'd often say to him, "but hardly anywhere else. You're almost never with me." "I'm here now," he would answer. She'd place a hand to his heart. "Not here you aren't." Poor Eliza. She'd been raised in a life of privilege, and while her father was one of the preeminent men in shipping, Mr. Haas delegated his responsibilities far more than Charles ever did. Eliza wasn't used to the long hours or prolonged absences that were necessary to keep a vast business empire thriving, but after accepting Charles's offer of marriage, she'd quickly learned that theirs was to be a relationship that would have to endure frequent separations. He liked Eliza. Interesting thing to say about your fiance, but go off. And he felt reasonably confident that she liked him as well. Okay, interesting thing to say about your fiance, but go off. Theirs, theirs would be a marriage based on mutual respect. A young woman from her social background was expected to make an advan- match, and marrying her would not only ensure her marital comfort, but his place in New York's upper ranks. They both benefited from the union. This clock seemed like a good way to make up for the fact that he hadn't been around for nearly a month. She liked pretty things, and the clock was quite handsome. Perhaps he wasn't exactly a doting fiance, yet he fully intended to give his future wife every material comfort. "I bought it at March aux Puces de Klingenecourt." Ah, French. Cool. Hopefully, it doesn't say anything French again. It went very well the first time. He set the clock on his desk and stood back to study it. "Sorry to inform you of this, Mr. Whitley," Rosie said, "but it doesn't seem to work, and I fully intend to get it running again before I give it to Eliza." It presented a puzzle, and he did enjoy solving puzzles. "By the by, she sent you a letter. It was delivered yesterday." The housekeeper pointed to an envelope on his desk. "Why didn't she send a telegram?" "Maybe she's not in love with technology as you are." Rosie cleared her throat and looked at the letter meaningfully. "All right, I'll read it now." Charles picked up the envelope and cut it open with an ebony-handled letter opener. He pulled out several sheets of pale yellow paper and scanned Eliza's delicate script. "What does it say?" Charles glanced at her. "I wonder why I tolerate your cheek, excuse me. Because without me, you'd spin in circles like a top. So, what's in the letter?" He skipped over Eliza's professions of love and her impatience for their wedding, which was scheduled for the spring, the earliest his schedule could possibly permit it. Eliza wanted a honeymoon, and the thought of spending at least 2 weeks away from his work nearly gave him a ple- apop- oh my god, have I just forgotten how to fucking read? Apoplexy. We'll we'll go with that one. Okay. Anyway, still, he secured them a trip to a number of the capitals of Europe, staying in the most exclusive hotels. That would certainly make the society pages of the newspapers. However, given that the current state of his nuptials was his and his fiance's business, he decided to tell Rosie only the other part of Eliza's letter. "She has invited me to her parents' Manhattan home to celebrate the holiday," he said. "Very good." Rosie headed toward the door of the study. "I'll tell Mr. Abernathy to pack you for the trip. You'll need something for Christmas Eve and, of course, Christmas morning, and I'm not going." The housekeeper stopped short and spun around. "You're not? But it's Christmas." "Whether or not it's the 25th of December is unimportant to me. I've worked on Christmas since I was 14, and I'm not going to stop now." He pulled a few sheets of paper out of the top drawer of his desk. "While I was abroad, I had some marvelous new ideas for improving the production line. Between that and fixing Eliza's clock, I'm simply too busy to take time off for the holiday." "Mr. Whitley," gaining steam, Charles said, "and you think Harold Morin doesn't work on Christmas? I'm sure he's just waiting for me to step away from my responsibilities so he can swoop in and have his business overtake mine." The very thought made Charles's blood boil. Morin would not best him. Charles would make certain of that. Absolutely not. Oh, but sir, Charles exhaled. Thank you, Rosie. That will be all. She must have seen that he would not be argued with, because she clamped her lips together and walked briskly from the room. Alone, finally. After making certain that no one else was nearby, Charles crouched down and carefully removed a piece of the floorboard. Beneath it was a 12 by 12-inch compartment lined with green felt. He grabbed his journal from atop the desk. Flipping through the pages, he reviewed the designs for a few new inventions he had sketched while in France. But the grind never stops. Not for a 14-year-old billionaire or whatever the fuck. It's not. He is not 14. He's 31 or whatever. The best age. Flipping through the page, blah, blah, blah. A billionaire. Yeah. Cringe. He needs to be killed. Uh After seeing some of the modern French processes for milling steel, he'd been struck with ideas about how to make his own product much faster, as well as stronger and more durable. The moment this tedious holiday season was over, he'd be in touch with the patent office. Charles set the journal into the slot, then put the piece of floorboard back in place. He'd had the compartment installed during the house's construction. Perhaps he might view his extreme caution as overly guarded, but he'd spoken truly to Rosie. His rival, Harold Morin, was ruthless in his determination to make his empire more successful than Charles. Only 2 months ago, Charles had been forced to fire a top level manager when it had been revealed that the man had been feeding Morin secrets. God, this is so annoying. This is some rich people problems, for sure. Morin had been Charles's constant source of irritation and anxiety for nearly a decade. It seemed as though they were perpetually stuck in a race with each other, both striving to be the first to reach the finish line that kept being pushed back farther and farther. Charles would have an idea, and mere days before he could file the patent, Morin would beat him with an idea that was almost identical, except Morin employed a research staff of half a dozen engineers while Charles developed ideas on his own. Charles would skip sleep entirely in order to personally travel to a new iron ore mine to secure more materials to create steel, knowing that Morin would try to get there before him and buy up all the ore. Charles had even caught Morin eyeing Eliza at various society functions, and that was unacceptable. He pushed his desk back into place before planting his hands on his hips to survey the compartment's disguise. In your eye, Morin. Needing a moment to gather his. In your eye? What the fuck does that mean? Must be some old people shit. Anyway, needing a moment to gather his thoughts, he gathered and gazed out the window. The land surrounding his substantial home was also expensive. It never failed to strike a chord of gratification in him to think that these acres belonged to him, when just over 15 years earlier he'd barely been able to afford a straw stuffed mattress in a boarding house room he'd shared with 7 other boys. But this land and this house were his. Yet, as he searched for a feeling of being grounded, of belonging, nothing came. He was still the same rootless kid he used to be so long ago, struggling to find a place for himself, but coming up empty handed. Needing to fix himself firmly in place, he looked at the moon. Real. Love you, the moon. He lifted a brow in surprise. The moon was a deep red. As he watched the dark. What the hell? Anyway. Da, 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 da. As he watched the dark disk of the Earth's shadow slipped across the moon, a lunar eclipse, not something that came around very often. He'd make a note of it later in his private journal for now. In his private journal. For now, he had to finish reading the rest of Eliza's letter. Perhaps that would make him feel as though he belonged somewhere. Picking up the paper, his gaze went to the last few lines. I know you so well, Charles. I know that you will probably not join my family and me for the holiday, just as I know you will spend that time working. I pray that you can slow down, live in the now, and enjoy Christmas. It is a magical time, and one I hope you can come to appreciate. Affectionately, Eliza. He frowned. Slow down? Live in the now? The future was a much more exciting place to be. He put the letter to one side and pulled the clock closer. After examining it for a few moments, trying to determine what could be causing its malfunction, he took a small leather case with delicate tools out from the top drawer of his desk. Charles bent down to analyze the source of the problem. He suspected it was too tightly wound. He picked up a thin screwdriver and used it to adjust a few of the clock's intricate pieces, a small modification here, a little tuning there. Working on the device brought a smile to his face. There was nothing more enjoyable than getting lost in the technological puzzle, figuring out the problems, making something better. If only his relationship with other people, including Eliza, could be as simple or as gratifying. Don't think about that now. Fix what you can and worry about the rest some other time. He looked up when the clock suddenly began to whir and while its pendulum started swinging back and forth. There it is, he said aloud in triumph. Haven't lost my touch. With a sudden twang, a tiny piece sprang free from the clock, startling him. The moment the best piece shot from the device. I'm sorry, where did I get best? Dude, I love reading. I'm so good at it. Anyway, the moment the piece shot from the device, the clock stopped working. Blast. He looked around the desk, searching for the missing piece. It was nowhere to be found. Perhaps it had fallen to the floor. He crouched down, running his hands over the floorboards and thick carpets. It's got to be around here somewhere. But the more he searched, the less certain he was that he would ever find the piece. With a frustrated exhale, he straightened. He started in shock. Christmas decorations were everywhere. They covered his study. From the tree covered. Oh, dude, let's go. Okay. Christmas decorations were everywhere. They covered his study, from the tree covered with ornaments in the corner to the swags of pungent evergreen hung around the room, and even the arrangement of red and green candles in the fireplace mantel. How? Someone must have snuck in while he was on the floor and decorated his study. That quickly? Okay, sure. But he hadn't heard them, and the idea that even a team of silent workers could trim the room in Christmas decorations in the span of less than a minute was absurd. Okay, thank you. He knew what marvels of technology could produce, and this was beyond the power of the best, most advanced steam engine. Many footsteps sounded in the hallway. A moment later, nearly a dozen people in the strangest clothes he had ever seen entered his study. For one thing, most of the women wore trousers, including very snug trousers fashioned of denim. Leading the group of strangers was a pretty young woman in a housekeeper's uniform. Right this way, everyone, she said in a bright musical voice. Here's Mr. Whitley's study. The woman was not Rosie. Charles had never seen her before, and he knew all of the members of his staff, and he never gave anyone permission to bring strangers into his study. Excuse me, he said crossly. What are you doing in my home? Did Rosie or Abernathy let you in? The woman in the uniform smiled, though there was a hint of confusion in her look. I'm Rosie. See here, he said, coming around his desk. Whoever you people are, you're trespassing in my home, and I want you all to leave immediately or I will summon the constable. As he spoke, many of the strangers in their peculiar outfits held up a small, brightly hued objects the size and shape of a deck of cards, and grinning aimed them at him. Who are you? A man asked him. I'm Charles Whitley. Who are you? Instead of answering, the man just held up his little device and stared at the other side of it, his attention rapt. The woman, who called herself Rosie, edged closer to him. With her so near, he could see the charming hazel hue of her eyes, and her cap partially covered her dark curls. Hey, she said under her breath. I thought Dan was playing Willie. I beg your pardon. She looked over at the people invading his home and his study. Whoever you are, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. They really think you're Charles Whitley. Because, he said hotly, with no attempt to speak in an undertone, I am Charles Whitley. Now, if you would be so kind, get out of my house. Chapter 3! We're making such good progress. I might have to run the ad early because I am dying. Whew. We got a few minutes. I've heard of method acting, Megan thought, but this guy is really committed to the role. The handsome stranger glared at her and the visitors. His posture. She should fucking recognize him. Hold on. Meanwhile, in 2017, so true. You're actually really close. The book was written in 2018. So I would assume that that's when it's set. Ow. But she should fucking recognize his ass. Like, if she has a crush on him and the picture was taken in 1902 and he's from 1902, bit of an oversight there from the author, but because I would fucking recognize my historical crush anywhere. Not that I really have one, but I would. I would remember my historical crush. That's very important to me, you know? But anyway, no matter. Uh, the handsome stranger glared at her and the visitors. His posture was impeccable, and whoever made his costume had done amazing work. The custom coat of his sack suit fit his wide shoulders flawlessly, and the matching waistcoat hugged his torso. His tie was in a perfect four-in-hand knot and looked to be genuine silk. Even his two-toned ankle boots appeared handmade and exactly right for a man of 1902. He was a perfect double of okay. I was gonna fucking say. He was a perfect double for Charles Whitley, too. His dark hair was styled just like Whitley's, while his neatly trimmed beard looked identical to the photograph. Plus, he was flat out gorgeous. He had a strong jaw and high cheekbones and vivid blue eyes beneath thick eyebrows. But she had to keep pretending she was Rosie, and Rosie never stared at her employer with moonstruck eyes. Glowering, the man went to the candlestick telephone at the edge of the desk. Back in 1902, the phone had been the height of technology. Now it was just a prop, not connected to any line. He picked it up, holding the receiver to his ear, and spoke into the mouthpiece. Operator, operator, get me the police! He scowled, appearing angry that there was no voice on the other line. What the deuce? No way! What the deuce? Check that shit out. What the deuce? Look at that. I love deuce. They wrote that! What the deuce? It's right there! Oh, books. Delicious. Anyway. Wow, this guy was really good, but he was getting a little carried away with playing the part. All right, ladies and gentlemen, smiling cheerfully to hide her bafflement, Megan stepped forward. It was probably a good idea to end the tour now, because this guy was messing up the order. Charles Whitley made his appearance at the end of the tour. Let's move on to the gift shop where you can find lovely souvenirs. It's just at the front of the house. As the visitors filed out, they continued to use their phones to record Charles Whitley. Oh, that's going next to the top worst line. Okay, maybe not too. Okay. What the deuce is so good? What do you mean? I think that's top 10 best lines, I think. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Okay, anyway. The man in question pointed an accusing finger at the mobile foes. What in gracious are those? The guests chuckled when then they walked out, heading toward the gift shop. Megan lingered rather than continuing on with the visitors. Whoever this guy was, he was doing an impressive job of playing Whitley. You're supposed to be in the ballroom, Megan said. Why? I'm not throwing a party. Oh boy, this person was deep in character. Still, she had to give him credit. That was incredible, she said. Even Ryan wasn't that into playing the part. He scowled at her. I have no earthly idea who or what you are talking about. Dan appeared in the doorway of the study, dressed in his Whitley costume. He sported a decent-looking fake beard, but compared to the newcomer, he was far less impressive. Coming into the study, Dan looked at the stranger in confusion. I heard some guests saying that Charles Whitley was in the study, not the ballroom. What's going on? I would like to know the same thing, the unknown man said. He's dressed as like Charles Whitley, Dan said to Megan. Why is he dressed like Charles Whitley? I keep telling everyone it's because I am Charles Whitley. Dan frowned. But I'm supposed to be Charles Whitley. Maybe Philip double booked the part, Megan suggested. At that moment, Philip hurried into the study. He stared at the stranger with admiration. Wow, I'd heard from the visitors at the gift shop that our Charles Whitley was incredible. But Philip said, but this is spectacular. He pulled his phone from his pocket. Our social media presence is blowing up. Dude, one of my least favorite things, I think, in the world. No, I'm dirty. One of my least favorite things in the world is when anything brings up social media. I fucking hate thinking about social media. Don't put it in movies. Don't put it in books. Don't put it in music. I'll fucking kill myself. I hate it so much. So the fact that social media has been mentioned several times in this book alone, I'm going to commit suicide. Social media moves really fast, I guess. Dude. Social media. All right, I have to run an ad really quick, so I'm going to go do that. Take a bit of a breather, because reading for an hour straight isn't very fun. But yes, it is. Okay, I will be right back. Everybody sit tight during the ad. Okay, I am back now. Thank you for the resub, Cat. It is appreciated as always. What the deuce? Okay, I probably shouldn't have ran a thank you, it's good to be back. Probably shouldn't have ran a full 3 minutes because I forgot that I have to end early. I have so much to do, it's not even funny. Um I'll have tomorrow morning to work on stuff also, but I don't want to like leave too much to do tomorrow morning cuz I'll probably be asleep for at least a little bit. Not too long, but anyway, half hour I'll end. Where am I? Or if the chapter is at a good point, I'll end at the chapter. We we will see. It's quite a few pages. But we'll try for the chapter. uh Social media? The stranger's expression grew more and more bewildered. Philip turned his phone around to show everyone the videos of Charles Whitley telling the visitors to his house to leave. Comments popped up at the bottom saying things like LOL and OMG, this guy is blowing my mind. Didn't you hire him? Dan exclaimed. No, Philip said, but I've been calling around town to let everyone know we're down an actor. Even with you playing for Whitley, we needed a Fredericks. He looked at the newcomer with admiration. I guess our new friend here heard the news and thought they'd make a much better Charles Whitley than a Fredericks. But Phillips turned to the stranger. If you want the job, it's yours. Sorry, he added to the scowling Dan, but this guy is amazing. Dan muttered something under his breath. He tore off his fake beard and stuffed it into his pocket. Though Megan ached for him, knowing how much he wanted the role, when she glanced down at the image on Philip's phone, her attention was riveted. We're going viral, she said in shock. That video already has 1,000 views in less than 5 minutes. Viral? As in an illness? The stranger steered forward and snatched the phone from Philip. He peered down at the screen. Then the expression on his face shifted from baffled to horrified. Is that date correct? The year is accurate? Hold the fucking phone. You mean to tell me that the first thing he decides to comment on is the date and not the fact that there's moving pictures in a tiny box? Because that's what he would actually be focused on, not the fucking date. Anyway, it should be, Philip said. Yesterday I updated the OS, so the glitch with the date was fixed. What are we doing? Okay, anyway, thank you, Philip. The phone dropped from the stranger's hand. It landed with a soft thud on the carpet. He stared at Megan, his eyes wide with shock, his face pale. Are you okay? She asked anxiously. I've read Wells's The Time Machine, and it seemed so unbelievable, but I think it's real. His gaze held hers, and the look of stunned amazement in his eyes made her heart contract. He seemed lost. As incredible as it sounds, he said in a wondering tone, I've traveled 116 years into the future. So this is okay. Dan, Philip, and Megan all traded disbelieving looks. Either the stranger was delusional or deeply committed to method acting, or, crazy as it seemed, he really was from the past. But that couldn't be. Could it? Surely Charles had to be dreaming. Line break. Surely Charles had to be dreaming. That had to be the only explanation for the outlandish world he found himself in. Yet everything seemed very real. He could smell the evergreen boughs hanging from the walls, the glass ornaments hanging from the Christmas trees, one in every room, felt cool and delicate against his hands when he touched them. And the sympathy in the gaze of the woman dressed like Rosie, it touched him deeply. As he looked around what had been the staff's dining hall 116 years ago, he looked in the new details of the room. In 1902, his house had been featured in numerous newspapers for his extensive use of electricity, but clearly that technology had progressed considerably, given the sheer number of lights that blazed from every corner and in the ceilings. A metal box that hummed was positioned near the modern sink, and when Charles opened it, cold air rushed out. A home refrigeration unit powered by electricity? He murmured to himself. My goodness. He pulled out a small, clear container that was far too lightweight to be glass. Perhaps it was a variety of polymer. A note had been affixed to the container, reading Megan. Tiny cakes made of rice, topped with what appeared to be pieces of raw fish, were inside the container. That's my sushi, the woman he now knew as Megan said. Plucking the vessel from his hands, she put it back inside the refrigeration unit and shut the door. What is sushi? She looked at him with a perplexed frown. Okay, you're still in character. It's a Japanese dish that rose in popularity in the United States during the 1960s. They sell it at restaurants and even in the supermarket. Few of the words that came out of her mouth made any sense, yet he distantly recognized that if he hadn't been so utterly confounded, he would have been pleased to talk with such an appealing woman. Only through it. Good luck at that, queen. 3 hours, that's doable. He would have been pleased to talk with such an appealing woman. She seemed quite intelligent and beautiful as well. Yet his mind spun too fast for him to fully appreciate her freckles and curls. Supermarket? She didn't answer him. Instead, she was pulled into a heated conversation between an Asian man and the gentleman who had been wearing a pantomime beard. You promised me the part of Whitley, the man wearing cheap, poorly constructed versions of Charles' clothing said. But the guests loved this guy, Dan, the Asian man replied. Maybe there's a compromise, Megan said. Charles looked down when someone tugged on the bottom of his jacket. A little girl with light brown skin and thick curly hair stared up at him, her expression full of wonderment. I'm Sophia, the girl said. Sophia Romano. It's nice to meet you. Though Charles was in a fog of confusion, he could still summon his manners. The heavens knew he'd worked very hard to acquire the finer points of etiquette. Pleased to meet you, Miss Sophia. I'm Charles Whitley. Sophia nodded wisely. I recognized you right away. You're not like the others who think I'm only pretending to be Whitley? The girl shook her head. You're him. A wave of thankfulness nearly overwhelmed him. It meant so much to simply be recognized for who he was, who he truly was. He nearly hugged the girl in gratitude. Megan broke away from the other conversation to stand behind Sophia. She glanced between the girl and Charles. Your dad's pretty upset. He'll understand, Sophia declared, especially once he sees that this is the real Charles Whitley. Megan chuckled, but then she quieted when she realized the girl wasn't attempting to be humorous. That's impossible. I bet our phones seem impossible to him, too, Sophia said, with the matter-of-fact tone of a child explaining something to an ignorant adult. But they're not. Who knows how time travel works? She shrugged. Maybe it's physics. Or maybe it's a Christmas miracle. Charles wrinkled his nose at the mention of Christmas, but given the elaborate way his home was decorated for the season, clearly the other people occupying his house had different opinions of the holiday. He had more important things to consider right now, including how he'd traveled through time, and how he could get back to his own time. If you're going to work here, Megan said, holding out her hand, I should introduce myself. I'm Megan Turner. I play the part of Rosie, the housekeeper. The woman who kept me in line. Charles couldn't help himself from smiling at her. He shook her hand. She had a nice firm grip, but her skin was far too soft for a housekeeper, and she smiled back at him. It was a delightful smile, spreading warmth through his chest. Charmed, he answered. I am Charles Whitley. She raised her eyebrows. What's your real name? That is his real name, Sophia said before Charles could. Right, Megan said brightly. It's method acting. I get it. Did you study at Yale? Maybe the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art or Actor Studio? You should talk to actor or Eliza. She's an actor too. She's in a show right now, so she's probably gone already so she can get to the theater in time. Charles straightened. He must have risen up from the lower ranks of society. He might have risen from the lower ranks of society, but certainly not so undignified as to ever pursue acting as a career. Miss Turner. Hey there, the Asian man said, stepping nearer. He beamed at Charles and shook his hand. I'm Philip, the museum's manager. Can I just say how absolutely thrilled we'd be if you stayed on to play Whitley? That is, Charles was supposed to enact the role of himself. How truly bizarre. Yet if he had to negotiate and navigate this new futuristic world, staying close to home would be the wisest course. At least he knew his own house. This isn't fair, the man who had been pretending to be Charles said. You said the part was mine. 5,000 views now, Dan. Charles had no idea what on earth that meant, but clearly it was significant because Dan deflated. Sophia quickly went up to him and took his hand. Sorry, Daddy. She looked up at her father with sympathy. I know what will cheer you up. What's that, Butterfly? Dan asked glumly. Mommy's waiting at home for us to decorate the Christmas tree. She tugged him toward the door. Come on. Her father mustered a small smile. That definitely cheers me up. He went with Sophia, but not before throwing over his shoulder. Charles Whitley would have never stolen someone's job. You're already wrong for the part. Charles scowled, but Dan and Sophia disappeared, and there was nowhere to direct his anger. 5,000 views now, Dan! Social media mention. Oh, so awful. Okay, anyway. The gall of that man to suggest I'm behaving dishonorably. Philip clapped his hands together. Our last tour is over, so we'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 8. Do you need to brush up on the facts of Charles Whitley's life? We've got plenty of research materials. I think I'm familiar with what it means to be Charles Whitley, he answered dryly. Great, Philip said. So you'll start tomorrow. Sound good? Telling Philip that Charles already had employment was an exercise in futility. It wasn't just that the man would never believe him, it was also the dawning realization that his job was no longer his at all. Surely Whitley Steel and Machines no longer existed, and what if it did? Some other man would run the place now. What did any of this mean? His mind was a whirligig, making it impossible for him to make sense of anything. There was so much he couldn't comprehend. How had he gotten here? Could he go back? What if he couldn't? How would he survive? Too many questions spun through his head, and he felt the ground beneath him shift as the world tilted on its axis. I need. He looked around. Megan had removed her cap and taken down her hair, which formed sweet waves over her shoulders. Her gentle face calmed him, but not fully. A man didn't just rocket through time without repercussions. Only Sophia believed he was who he said he was. If he insisted too vociferously, surely the others would think him mad, and madmen were most likely not allowed to roam the streets freely. The idea of being incarcerated or confined made his throat close. I need to lie down. He stalked from the room and headed toward his bedchamber. Megan and Philip quickly followed. The house, he was pleased to note, had barely changed. Everything looked exactly as he had left it, with the exception of Christmas decorations. Whoever lived in his home now had done an admirable job of preserving its appearance. The floors were polished, the lights blazed, and there wasn't a single cobweb to be found. He climbed the stairs to the second story. It calmed him a little to see the paintings he had acquired, reminding him of permanence and stability. His world might be falling apart, but at least the 17th century paintings remained. As Charles approached his bedchamber, Philip said, You can't actually sleep in this room. It's part of the museum, Megan added. Charles drew up short. His way into his room was blocked by a burgundy velvet rope. Just beyond it lay his bed, and all the familiar furnishings he had surrounded himself with, including a writing desk and leather chairs by the fire. But for some bizarre reason, he couldn't actually touch his own possessions. You've turned my home into a museum, as I specified in my will, and people actually come here? Of course, Megan said. Charles Whitley was one of America's most successful innovators. People loved to hear about him and see how he lived. It was a it was difficult not to feel smug at this description of himself. However, that didn't change the fact that his home was not his anymore. He had to concern himself with the basics before he could approach the larger questions and implications of time travel. If I can't sleep here, where can I go? Philip sighed. How about this? If you're so committed to playing the part, you can stay in the part of the house that's been modernized. People sometimes pay to use one or more of the rooms if they're renting the museum for a special event, like a wedding. Will that work? I think so, Charles said after a moment. He was receiving permission to reside in the house he had designed and paid for. How bizarre. As if reading his mind, Megan asked, Do you have any money? Charles patted his pockets. His heart sank. I seem to have left my billfold back in 1902. Unless the world had profoundly altered and people paid for goods and services with moon rocks without any cash, Charles would find it very difficult to survive in the modern era. This is for your work today. Philip pulled out his wallet and peeled off a few bills before handing them to Charles. It was rather galling to think he'd have to rely on anyone to provide his income, but he wasn't foolish enough to refuse it. He could ill afford to be too prideful when he was an outsider in a strange world. My gracious, he stared at the money in his hand. $20? Surely that's far too generous. I could rent a house for a month with this. Megan stared at him, but Philip only shook his head and laughed. You're too much, Charles. Philip did a strange thing with his fingers, forming them into brackets as he said Charles's name. Charles opened his mouth to protest further, but Megan said quickly, Philip, I'll show Charles to his room. It's the guest room in the East Wing, right? Why don't you head out and we'll see you tomorrow? Philip looked a bit dubious, but after a moment he nodded. Sure. Have a good night. Philip gave a cheerful salute before trotting off. When they were alone, Megan turned to him. Come on, I think you'll be comfortable in the spare room. I should hope so, Charles said. After all, I did have my home constructed with 8 guest chambers. I might not be Vanderbilt, and this isn't Biltmore House, but my hospitality has not and cannot be faulted. Right. Megan smiled uncertainly. Follow me, and let's get you settled for the night. Chapter 4, so I'm finished 10 minutes early. discussed with the updates was us, which would be so funny. I don't think they did very many though. Like if I recall from the movie, there wasn't too much that they changed with the house. But anyway, I have to go clean pretty badly. So we're going to call it here. I think finishing this is feasible. If that's how much we got through in half the time, double that, we should be able to finish this in only a couple Saturdays. 4, maybe. 4 Saturdays. Good luck with cleaning. Thank you very much. I will need it because I will be painting floorboards and scrubbing the bathroom floor as well. So much to do. We did get through quite a bit. Because what'll be interesting, gotta make posts. Very sorry. Because what's interesting about how we've been reading before is a novel is about 80,000 words-ish. Also counting this for my Goodreads goal. You sly fucking dog. I guess it would count because I'm basically being an audiobook with like a little extra commentary. My condolences about the commentary, but not too much. But 80,000 words was how long Gord Vendôme's Downward Spiral was. So if this is about 80,000 as well, this should take about 4 streams. So it's kind of interesting to kind of like see it in book form as opposed to thank you. As opposed to the archive of our own bullshit that we're used to. So I might read more books in the future, I'm not sure. It's fun, I like to read. But they'll have to be bad. They can't be good. Luckily this is a Hallmark book, so they can't fuck. Because in my, Truly Madly Plaid, they fucked. So, couldn't read that. So good thing I read that in my own time. Okay. I can't be asked to rate out, to be honest with you, so I won't. I gotta go clean. I will see everybody tomorrow with the schedule. I fucking hope. If not, tomorrow with the schedule Monday. For whatever drawing bullshit I get up to. You're very stream. We'll see everybody when I see you. Godspeed out there. I love you.